So the question is, have we lost something in the move towards federated search? And I just want to just tell that little story about how things seem to have evolved from my perspective, that in the 1980s, when I started work in the early 1980s, typically, searches were done on very well-regulated bibliographic databases on search services like Dialog by an intermediary, an information officer or a subject librarian. Things then evolved because the internet came along, it became a thing, and so people started to search things themselves. And in response, a lot of the library packages, the OPACs, started to introduce search capabilities. And those have evolved. The end user searching is now the order of the day. We've had things, we've moved from the Alta Vista era of searching to the Google knowledge graphs type of searching. But typically that is done through a search box. And so, you know, this is a typical example. I'm using the library management system in operation at Edinburgh Napier University, the institution that I belong to. I have to say it's a brilliant service and it's absolutely fantastic. The staff are brilliant, but there are problems. And I just want to illustrate some of those problems before discussing what we're proposing to do to try and address some of these issues. If you're interested in digital literacy, you can do a typical search tapping keywords. If you're a little bit more sophisticated, and there I get something like over 52,000 references for this particular search. If I am a little bit more sophisticated, I might realize, well, actually it's searching for those two words independently. So I'll put quote marks around them. And again, you can do things like this on Google. So it's really trying to replicate the experience that people have on the internet. And I get something like around 10,000 search items. So we've made some progress. And maybe we're getting slightly more accurate material as a result of that. I can even do a subject search. So the system actually allows me to search by different fields, which might be useful if you want to distinguish between the word Brown in an author name and the word Brown in the title of a journal article, for instance. So that's very good. And it even does things like it adds its own synonyms. So somebody's done some work to try and enrich that. But I don't really know what it's doing. I don't know what indexes it's looking at, what classification systems it's looking at, whether there's any added metadata. Maybe it's just the author metadata, or maybe it's a controlled language. I have no idea how it's come up with that. I've increased the number of items retrieved slightly, but I don't know what basis that's done on. So if you do a variety of searches, I've done searches on kind of related areas, digital literacy, digital competence, information literacy. These are all terms that are used in the literature. They overlap with one another. You can see some of the kind of variances you get just by taking simple measures in doing that. But we also have the problem of spelling variations, and those of us, you know, with a chemistry background are well used to the problems of the American and the English spelling of sulfur dioxide with a PH or with an F. Or aluminum versus aluminium. Again, that's kind of variations of spelling. Now, if you're looking at something like chemical abstract, they control that. They've got identifiers which are associated with a particular substance, so you get over the spelling kind of problems. Disambiguation is another problem. If you're searching a general resource, and you put in train, are you talking about train as in teaching somebody a skill? Are you talking about train the vehicle? Or are you talking about train of processes that are going on? Those are all kind of ways in which you might search for that. Another problem that you have is actually language is dynamic. It changes, it evolves in time. So, you know, very often people used to talk about American Indians, and you'll find some of the older literature refers to that. That's not considered acceptable now. If you're looking in North America, in Canada, they very widely talk about First Nations. But they also have some acronyms like FNMI, which in certain communities they would understand that including First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. That's actually quite a kind of wide agglomeration of different groups and so on. Indigenous people is also widely used across the globe as a term, and again that is evolving and changing. In contemporary US literature, Native Americans is often used. Amerins are used widely in the Americans and the Caribbeans. I'm interested because my grandmother's ancestors were Amerins. So it's very interesting. I'm about to go to Brazil to do some teaching, and there they make a distinction between Indios, which are people of what would have been known as Amerind descent, and Indianos, people who come from the Indian subcontinent. So there they've actually evolved their terminology in order to acknowledge that actually this was a complete misnomer dating back to Columbian times. So what are the bases on which people select library management systems? And some early work done by Olson suggested that actually there were things like saving money, facilitating departmental reorganization, or improving public perception of a library were factors that might have influenced decisions, rather than the search capabilities that they offered, or their ability to do subject search and so on. And we have this real issue about what is it we're looking at when we're looking at discovery systems in libraries, and this is the focus of the work of the working group. We're looking at that, particularly in research and academic libraries. And this is a simplified version. There are probably many different models you could use, but it's one way of looking at it. You have a range of resources here that you are trying to index and so on. There's metadata associated with those resources. Some of that is highly structured. Some of that is imposed from outside. Some of it is using controlled languages, whether that's classification schemes or thesaurus terms. And that is available to your search engine. So when you put in a search, you've got your search box, a typical kind of interface that most people use and most people are faced with. Then something happens and you get your retrieved items. But we don't really know what's happening in here. This is opaque, it's not transparent. And the suspicion is that actually we're losing a lot of the facility of search systems of the subject metadata because it's being ignored or it's not being used in an appropriate way. And we've had some very good illustrations already in this conference about some of the issues that might arise about the different systems may have different ways of ranking or of describing the materials. So how do you integrate things as well? So we can then turn to back to what are the origins of subject access? Why are we doing it? Why are we? What are we trying to make available to people? What is the purpose of cataloging of libraries of metadata? And we can go back to Cutter, you know, who said that the objects or the purposes of a catalog were to enable finding, to show what the library has or what our resource has, and to assist in the choice of a book. That's just a massive simplification of that. We can update that to the current library reference models that people are widely referring to. So we can say, you know, that the purpose is to find, to identify, to select, obtain, and explore resources. So That's what we want to facilitate. If we're presenting users with a search interface, what is it we're trying to enable? And maybe there's an agenda, and again, I think there have been many contributions, and I hope that we can have this ongoing debate about how we actually move forward with that. So controlled subject terms from vocabularies, how do we actually make that intelligence, that intellectual effort that's been put into those resources available to the user, rather than the library system ignoring them. Doing full text searching, which is great, you know, that offers a lot of possibilities, but it's not the end, it's not the be all and end all. How do we allow hierarchical browsing of classification schemes? And again, we've seen some of the intricacies of how that might be presented to people, what kind of choices there are about people being able to interact with classification scheme, how important they may be in order to browse a resource. Interactive online help and instruction on searching. Again, presenting people with the options to allow them to actually select what they need. Thesaurus-based search terms. And again, suggestions, you know, what are the related terms? What are the sibling terms? It may be that what you're looking for is not what you set out in your original search. And Belkin talked about, you know, this idea of anomalous state of knowledge, the idea that actually if you're looking for something, it's because you don't know it. And therefore, you are trying to fill a gap in your knowledge. But if you don't know it, how do you describe what you don't know? Sometimes it's easier to do that, but very often you're actually, you need to explore, you need that, maybe that serendipity that Stefan was talking about yesterday. Integration of thesauri in search engines, you know, that's not a straightforward thing, because of course there are many different vocabularies and there are many ways of analysing a subject. There are different perspectives, so that may not be as straightforward as we're talking about, but can we offer that facility to people? And then the idea of multilingual thesauri. So what are we talking about? The kind of functionality of a subject-based discovery system. What do we want? We want to be able to cost-based knowledge organization system-based searching at the item level, but also at the collection level. We want to be able to navigate both of those areas. Cost-based browsing, again, discovering the actual collection may be important before we actually start looking for individual items. And cost-based indexing, how do we apply terms to that? Maybe something else that comes into that increasingly important is image retrieval. So the working group that has been formed on subject access is looking at that. We're currently working on the literature review, so that's in process, and we hope to publish that either in knowledge organization or in ISKO, in the encyclopedia of knowledge organization. We're going to do a preliminary survey, so that will be launched very shortly, to find out what people think are the kind of issues. And we'll use that to help us do some workshops. So we'll be asking for your participation and input to that process. And what we want to do is have focus groups not only with academic and research librarians, but also people representing user communities and those representing the indexing communities. We'll then widen that out to talking to some of the library suppliers. Many of the discovery systems that are out there are actually have got features that will allow you to use controlled languages, but they're not always implemented, or they're not publicized very well. So again, that's something that we want to have a dialogue, so that we can then produce some guidelines. And the idea is those guidelines will be used by people who are procuring systems, so that they've got a kind of checklist of the sorts of things that they might want to ask suppliers in order to be able to facilitate subject access via knowledge organizing systems, such as classification systems or other controls, language systems for their users. We'll be consulting then next year with different interest groups after we produce some draft guidelines, and then we hope that towards the end of next year we'll be able to produce some guidelines that will be, we hope, of use. And so we've got this preliminary survey. I'll leave this up during the lunch break, so you can use the QR code, or you can, if you feel inclined, tap in the number. I believe the presentations will also be available afterwards, so people can do that. But I would invite you to participate in this survey. It's being launched now, and we welcome your feedback. This is a preliminary survey, so this will feed into the design of our workshops, which we'll be holding online. And we hope that some of you will be participating in those. So you've got an opportunity to volunteer for that as well. So that's more or less what we're talking about. I also want to just acknowledge who has been providing input to this working group. So Claudia Noli, Caroline Golub, myself, Patrick Lamb was involved, but has got other commitments, so he stepped back. But he was very active in the early parts of this and helped to shape our thinking. Athena Salaba, Ali Shiri, and Ida Savage. So my thanks to everyone who's been involved, and then all the people who've kind of advised us from outside and provided feedback. So that's just a summary of what we'd like you to do. We'd like your input in the questionnaire survey. We'd like you to participate in the online focus groups, and then also maybe to point us to contacts among suppliers so that we can engage them in that process.